From your home team, this is 25 News.
A man's calling to serve led to many blessings. 24 children fostered, more than a dozen homes and cars bought to give away. Over 30 ministers ordained, along with an integrated court system, thanks in large part to him. Good Wednesday evening. I'm Tyler Lopez.
And I'm Janice Rebholz. Now, Bishop Joseph Johnson is retiring. In part one of Called to Serve, Rashawn Haynes shares his story.
He helped us buy a home. He put my brother through college. He put my nephew through college, bought his home.
If you see a need, he'll fulfill it.
He's always been a beacon of hope and for support for so many people.
Bishop Joseph Johnson is a man who's lived a marvelous life, leaving his mark everywhere he goes. His story begins in 1935 in Benoit, Mississippi. Born a triplet, Joseph is the 12th child of 17, far more than he says his 72-year-old father ever wanted.
Dad never got over it. He was one of those fathers that never shook my hand, hugged me at all.
A close-knit relationship with his father never happened. Charlie Johnson died when Joseph was just 6 years old, leaving him and his 16 siblings with a single mom.
My mom was the kind of person that at least 4 times a day, she would say, "I love you." My mom was a very, very loving, caring person.
Growing up in Mississippi, the kids were eventually sent to work in the cotton fields, a task Joseph, who was often considered the favorite, was able to elude.
I said, no, I'm not doing that. And she let me get away with it until I was 17.
So he sought a way out.
He knew he did not fit in the South. He knew that, hard labor was not his portion.
After a year of begging and pleading, his mom finally gave in, and 18-year-old Joseph Johnson moved to Peoria, Illinois in 1953. It was an adjustment.
Growing up in Mississippi, I didn't know segregation like I did in Peoria. I did not know racism.
Joseph says he was called to ministry at the age of 22 and spent 4 years in Chicago for seminary, but he chose not to stay.
Chicago was just too crowded for me. So on the night of graduation, I was already packed, and I moved to Peoria that night.
Once back in the River City, Joseph served as a community worker for the Department of Corrections for 17 to 18 months, accompanying young people who appeared in court alone.
I wanted to work with young folks, perhaps because Dad didn't work with me.
Soon, he received a call from a judge who asked if he was interested in working for juvenile courts, an offer he quickly rejected.
The law was so permanent, and I was afraid that I would put something in the file that would be damaging to the kid for the rest of his life.
Eventually, Joseph was convinced and walked into his new role as a probation officer. 3 years later, he was promoted to director of the juvenile court system, becoming the first Black person to work in the Peoria courthouse and hold that position. Back in the 60s, Peoria County had a population nearing 190,000 people. 5.4% of them were Black, but they made up 90% of the cases.
They didn't provide counseling for Black kids at that time. I changed that situation.
Joseph not only provided resources, but also implemented programs necessary for community success.
It was a need, and nobody objected.
In March of 1968, a decade into his time at the courthouse, Joseph Johnson was chosen to pastor Star of Hope Baptist Church, now known as Star of Hope Full Gospel.
When I went there, they was basically 2 years behind in paying their present pastor salary.
He didn't receive a paycheck from the church for 38 years. Despite the financial hardships, the congregation welcomed him. However, his standards sent some out the door.
I believe that you must live what you preach. It made me the person that I am now.
So Joseph Johnson continued to manage 2 full-time jobs, serving as both director of juvenile courts and pastor of Star of Hope. With a clear calling to serve, he's always had a passion for children.
My dad didn't have no passion for me. And I believe that every child should be loved. There should be a male figure in their life. That grew out of what I didn't see in growing up. If you want to do something for somebody, and it's good enough, the Lord will give you an opportunity to do it. And so
Joseph Johnson's upbringing and faith in God led him to the man he is today, a man that he says has blessed members of his congregation and those of the community.
And on the way in part 2, you'll not only see how Bishop Johnson integrated the Peoria courthouse and the changes he made, but how he came into millions of dollars and then used that fortune to help others. Plus, we'll hear his plans moving forward now that he's fully retired. Part 2 airs tonight at 10.